Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Focused Marketer, where we discuss anything and everything related to marketing as well as data. Today, I have a very special guest with me, and his name is Xan Hong. He's joining us from Driver Face Consulting. And Xan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So just for our listeners today, could you give a brief background about yourself and, what you've been up to lately?
Yeah, so I run an agency called Dry Face Consulting, and we primarily build custom apps, but specifically we build it in using no-code technology. And kind of relevant there is by using no-code technology, we've saved our clients over $1 million in app development costs. And a lot of what we build incorporates AI into them. As you can imagine, a lot more clients are asking to build some sort of AI functionality into a lot of the builds that we do. But yeah, so that's kind of the bulk of what we do.
Awesome. Thank you. And you kind of mentioned, no code technology, and a lot of people have been asking you about AI. I think it has become the sort of topic of, at least the past couple conversations I've had. Every conversation kind of leads to AI today. So,
Can it not?
yeah. And I think given the fact that, a lot of our listeners are very curious about marketing and the intersection of AI, I think given your experiences, there are some questions I would love to dive into with you. So I think we can kind of start off by some questions that I've been hearing out a lot, like, will AI become a CMO replacement, or is it just an assistant to kind of aid humans? So I'd love to kind of, get your thoughts on that to get started.
So I think let me preface that answer with I don't think anyone knows, because what I tell people, the comparison I always give, there's a Wayne Gretzky quote that says, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going. But I've said over and over again, with AI, the challenge is, for the first time, it's virtually impossible to know where the puck is going. What I do tell people, though, is when you look at the trajectory, right? I think OpenAI was launched, a few years ago at this point. If you look at the strides that AI has made in just that short period of time, and then now you've got DeepSeek launched, and I don't even, most people didn't even expect that to happen. And the big incremental change that represents. What I would tell you is, I don't think AI is in the place right now to replace a lot of roles. But if you play out the trajectory, I don't see it. I almost don't see a way that it can't replace all those roles at some point in the future. Now, is that 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years? Who knows? But I think the trend is going in that direction. And what I would also say is, unlike a lot of past trends where the innovation was disruptive of kind of lower skilled jobs, I think the interesting thing about AI is it's disrupted both lower skill and higher skill job at kind of a similar rate. And so, yeah, do I see that happening? Absolutely. Because, what we can't really compete with as humans, I give the example, I don't know if there's any Marvel fans in your audience, but I've been watching the entire timeline of Marvel movies with my daughter, in sequential order. And we just finished up Endgame, and there's a scene there where Doctor Strange kind of does this thing where he goes through 14 million scenarios and then says, okay, this is the one where we win, right? And so I look at that almost as AI's the advantage that they have over us, right? Because they can simulate so many different scenarios so quickly. And again, the more data it has, the better it can do that, where it's like we can't do that. So, I hate to do these conversations and not sound, dystopian, but, you play it out, and that does seem to be where it goes, right? And so I would say the answer is, at some point, I do see that happening.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of, the stress that kind of comes with it. I think you mentioned it has so much data, and the more data it gets, the better it gets. But there's also a lot of people have been talking about the ethical concerns that comes with the data that, AI has. So what are your thoughts on that? Like you kind of leverage AI in your work today also. What do you think about the ethical considerations?
I struggle with it, if I'm being honest with you. I struggle with it because I think there is a lot of, it's just like capitalism in general, right? There's a lot of good that can come from capitalism. And I think that's true of AI. There's a lot of good that can come from AI, but there's also a lot of destruction that can come from AI as well. And so I do struggle with, okay, am I contributing to, the eventual unemployment of a lot of people? And at the same time, I don't know if this is an excuse or not, but I've also come to a couple realizations. Number one is this is happening whether I do it or not, right? And I've also come to the realization that if I don't do it, my competitors are. And so by not embracing it, I'm putting my own business at a disadvantage. And so, someone had said, you know, are our jobs going to be replaced by AI? And the answer is probably not yet today, but what it's definitely going to get replaced by is someone that understands AI if I don't. Does that make sense? And so yeah, I think there are a lot of ethical concerns. I think the other piece of it that from an ethical standpoint that you have to be aware of is garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you're feeding it bad data or biased data, right, then what comes out is going to be subpar or also biased, right? And so I think those are all concerns that for those that are using AI that we do have to be aware of to make sure that we are at least kind of taking that into consideration when we are using.
I think garbage in, garbage out is one of my favorite phrases here at Dig Growth also. We're heavy on data, and even we have, like, we kind of work with no code connectors.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of what we do really depends on the quality of data we're feeding, like, our systems. So I think that's shedding light on that is such an important aspect. I think we can also kind of move forward in terms of, like, a lot of people have been using AI lately, like ChatGPT at least for content generation. If everyone is using, AI, does marketing like kind of lose its like kind of differentiation? Like, how do you really compete in a market now where like all the emails, all the things that people use in their typical marketing and reach out are starting to get very similar and they kind of lack differentiation. So your
You
thoughts
mean
on
unlocked and empowered? have if it starts with unlocked or empowered, that ChatGPT wrote that, right? Yeah. So or it's got emojis all over the place. It's ship emojis, and so yeah, no, yeah. So I think it's a great point, and one area where I think is an area that can be a so you're right. The differentiation piece, I think, is kind of in danger, right? Of kind of you're giving up the steering wheel to AI. From a marketing perspective, where I do think it has tremendous value, and I don't think this is an area where I don't think a lot of people are taking advantage of is personalization, right? So like cold email is a great example, right? So cold email historically doesn't do that well because you're getting the same message to a lot of people. Where I think you can leverage AI in a really powerful way, and again, I think you are differentiated if you do use it in this way, is taking the data that's available to you and then running that through AI to then change that cold email into a hyper personalized message at scale, right? And so that I think is kind of a use case where I think you are leveraging AI in a way that can kind of differentiate you from others because that's not easy to do because you have to create workflows to one, gather the data, then kind of create very detailed prompts to take the data that's available to you and then create very personalized messages that is going to resonate with that recipient. And so I think there are ways to leverage AI to differentiate yourself beyond just going into the off the shelf version of ChatGPT and then
Yeah.
saying, hey, write my Facebook post for me. Does that make sense? Those are some areas where I do think if you can figure out how to do that, and again, stuff that's easy always lowers the bar for differentiation, because if everyone can do it, then there's no differentiation. But stuff that's a little bit harder to do, I think represents an opportunity, because the harder it is to do, the less people that can do it, the more you can differentiate yourself.
Definitely. And in the industry, have you also been seeing any impact of AI on sort of B2B sales and marketing alignment? I know at Growth, we're kind of using AI for predictive lead scoring, and it's able to really give more accuracy now that, you kind of have that opportunity to. Is that
Yeah.
something?
So B2B specifically, I think it depends, right? Like if you're going after enterprise clients, I don't think you're quite ready to hand the wheel over to that so much, right? So maybe if you're doing B2B small business, which a lot of times I feel like kind of looks a little bit closer to B2C, if that makes sense. And so I think maybe you can use more, but uh but I think B2B enterprise, I think is a little bit stronger, is more relationship based. And I think that probably is, in my opinion, maybe where you don't necessarily want to take some of the shortcuts per se and really come across as genuine, right? Like I think so. I think it kind of depends. I think if it depends on who that, like anything in marketing, right? Like it depends on who that target market is, and so I think it's a case by case. It might be industry based, but I do know some of the people that I know that are targeting more like enterprise clients aren't really necessarily using kind of the AI as heavily as maybe some that are doing B2C or kind of B to small business type of market.
So I guess there's still opportunity for growth there in terms of,
Yeah.
your
What you're
AI.
saying with the lead scoring, like I haven't necessarily experienced that so much, but I can see that being powerful. But again, I think the AI really brings value when it's high volume. And when you're dealing with
Mhm.
enterprise clients, I don't think you're typically dealing with high volume. But I mean, I think you could still use it for some predictive scoring as well. I don't necessarily have experience with that, but I could definitely see where that has value.
Yeah. And how are you maybe, seeing a shift in terms of customer journeys now that do you see that it's making any impact on it? Or should we sort of continue using the typical stages that,
You
we
know,
had previously?
I think again, I don't necessarily have personal experience with that, but to your point, the more data that you have, I mean, let's use Facebook as an example, right? Facebook ads are extremely efficient now because they have so much data on us and the predictive, and they're able to tie a host of kind of behavioral data to demographic data to predictive data, and so, I think you can apply that same type of scenario to other use cases. So yeah, I think it can be highly effective in those scenarios. I think it just comes down to, that there's a lot of technical knowledge that needs to go into that, analysis and then using that in a very predictive way, like meaningful way. But yeah, no, I definitely could see that as being a value add from a marketing perspective.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned Facebook ads, right? So let's, I guess, dive deeper into the scenario of how do you kind of see future of media buying, right? How do you see the ad budgets now for CMOs out there? How does one kind of go about navigating them?
Well, I mean, kind of going down the AI route, I'll be honest, I've used a lot of AI tools to help with the audience selection, help with the creative generation. And if I'm being honest, that's outperformed some of the agencies we work with, right? And so, you kind of talked about that CMO route. I mean, that's kind of a good leading indicator that we may not need a lot of small businesses or kind of SMBs can do media buying without having to go through a lot of agencies in the past. And so, again, both from a creative standpoint, a strategy standpoint, but it goes back to what you're saying though, is you start to see a lot of the same strategies being used over and over again, at least until the AI. I had a conversation a couple weeks ago, like humans will always be more creative than AI. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think that's definitely true today is, AI will pick what the data tells it to will be most successful. But I can tell you, kind of being in the startup world a while, I've also seen the same exact strategy work for one company and not work for another. And so there's really, unless there's some data points that I'm not seeing as to why that's the case, is AI going to be able to pick up on what's going to work when? Eventually it may, but there is something to be said of kind of having a human element and going back to your differentiation, kind of adding a human emotional touch to it, right? Because we do know that people buy on emotion, right? And so is AI, aware enough to be able to understand that? It's able to understand it from a data analysis of a huge data set, but does it truly understand the why behind why it's working? Does that make sense? And so I think that's where, there are opportunities, but again, it goes back to what's hard, right? Like it's not easy to kind of figure some of those things out. And so it's easier to plug something into ChatGPT and go with it. And yeah, I mean, it'll get the job done, but will it truly differentiate that brand in a meaningful way? So that's where I think as humans, I think we can still add a touch of what can be the difference between a good campaign and a great campaign, right?
Yeah, and I think like AI is kind of pushing or forcing us to kind of rethink about some of the strategies we've been using. For example, A/B testing. I think now instead of actually having to spend a lot of money in testing something, you can rely on some of the data that's actually available out there, and it wouldn't take you as long to gather that data and
Sure.
make an informed decision. So I think in terms of efficiency, definitely people that aren't already leveraging AI, I think
Well,
definitely
I
should
I
start.
really think where the big opportunity is, and this honestly wouldn't be possible without AI, is kind of what I alluded to before, is personalization at scale. Like that, I think, is something that can really be a game changer where you're dynamically changing messaging based on the individual and the data that you know about that individual. And again, I think that's virtually impossible to do without AI, right? Like, and so that's where I see a huge opportunity. But again, it comes back to that's not necessarily easy to do. That's not just putting a prompt in the ChatGPT. Like you have to create systems in place and processes to figure out, A, how to segment that audience, and then B, how do you personalize that data, that messaging in a very meaningful way. And so I think that's really where not even just cold email, but like even like you said, ad buying, right? Like taking that and dynamically updating the messaging and tweaking the messaging to really speak to an individual. And it's, what the marketers that get that right will definitely separate themselves, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I think sort of changing gears here,
Yeah.
initially we talked about like, more players sort of entering the market. It was ChatGPT being the entire rage, and now DeepSeek AI is kind of like, the newest thing that's been talked about. Have you, heard anything, done any research on that? What are your thoughts on like, DeepSeek AI right now, and where do you think it's heading?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I haven't touched it. And actually, I literally just saw something, I think it was ABC News this morning, that a security firm analyzed the code and they actually found code that suggests that data is being sent directly to the Chinese government. Now, DeepSeek is also created as open source, so I think there might be ways to kind of create a version of DeepSeek that may not have that, but I haven't touched it for that reason. My thought is if they're banning TikTok for security concerns, then using AI, that doesn't seem like something I wanna mess with, right? Because the data that you're giving, an AI it can be super super personal, right? So I have
Absolutely.
not touched that yet for those concerns, and that was actually really confirmed this morning. So that's the latest, and that
Yeah.
they said that was as of this morning that I heard that, and they said other security experts have confirmed they literally found lines within that code that suggest that it goes directly to servers of an entity that is controlled by that is known to be controlled by the Chinese government.
Yeah, I think if we were concerned about the ethics when it came to sort of
Yeah,
ChatGPT, these concerns get even more
yeah.
real when
Like
people,
if the Chinese government has the TikTok dance that I did, I'm like, all right, I'll live with that. But if they have kind of what's my marketing strategy for XYZ, like that's a little bit more sensitive. So yeah, that's where I'm a little bit more gun shy about taking a deep dive on it. So yeah, no, I have not touched it for that specific concern.
definitely that makes sense. And I kind of want to delve into the topic of like, where do you kind of see the future of search in such an AI driven world? And like, what challenges do you think Google search engine face in this world right now? Because a lot of focus has been in the past on SEO and getting your Google ranks and like, what are your thoughts on how we search these days?
Yeah, I think Google is still, number one, but I have an e-commerce business and there was one sale that came in the other day where the source was ChatGPT. Yeah, like I hadn't seen that before. So I was like, oh, but you do see more people starting to look at how do you optimize for AI. And I think it comes down to generations, right? So our first instinct, I'm Gen X, I think. And so, our instinct is to Google, but there's something to be said of a chat conversational search environment, right? And so, I look at my daughter who's 12, right? And so she grew up with a tablet. So, I remember her trying to use my laptop once, trying to swipe my tablet, my desktop, my screen on my laptop, right? And so I think, and just hearing her like searching for stuff, just naturally, whereas like at 12, like I wasn't doing, searches. And so I think like as we move on, I think you will see more and more people searching in a chat like environment or whatever comes out. Again, it's chat today, but it could be something else in the future or voice AI or, something like that. So I do think that will start to change rapidly. And again, it makes sense that Google's investing in Gemini and Microsoft, investing in OpenAI, and things like that, because it does seem like more and more people. And again, I mean, now most of my searches, the first result is an AI response to it, right? And
Definitely.
so it is interesting, but I will say you do have to be careful. Like you probably need to fact check that a little bit better than I have, because hallucination. They refer to hallucination. That is real. I mean, those things do happen, and so I do think you have to be a little bit careful of that. But I do think it's going to move in that direction and probably move fairly quickly. So
Yeah, and for marketers that are kind of, still trying to get the like even if your commerce business you mentioned, you want to be able to get like attention of customers that might be a right fit for you. So like now what do you think people should start doing in terms of marketing? Where should they invest their energies to kind of like get more of the insights, even if it's Gemini, kind of giving those insights at the top? How can marketers really put themselves out there so their brand is
so
recognized?
that's a great question, and I'll be honest with you. I'm fairly knowledgeable in SEO. I'm not as knowledgeable as to what will optimize for AI, if I'm being honest. Now, I suspect that for now, there's a lot of the same things, right? Because a lot of the knowledge that's coming from is probably coming from search results, right? So if it, if you're the top of the search results, then it will probably help. But as far as the technical aspects of what, like you even see with SEO, backlinking has become, backlinking used to be the end all be all for SEO. And I've seen that become, you know, I think it's still important, but I also think it used to be a pure volume game. And now I've seen it become more of a quality versus
Yeah,
quantity. And
yeah,
so, that's changing very quickly as well. And so I think, I do think, I had this conversation with someone else. I think the biggest challenge to humans is at the end of the day, AI, it's the speed aspect, right? It's how quickly things change now, where I tell people, like, you almost have to place a bet on what you think is going to happen, and then go all into that, because as humans we can't adapt quick enough for the technology. And so, again, I do no code, and so I'm essentially having to place a bet on what platforms I think are going to kind of, what the cream is going to rise to the top, because I can't learn these platforms quick enough to, if I'm wrong. And so I think the same thing is true about this, is you need to just be nimble, because I don't have the answer to that, because it's changing so quickly. You need to find ways to kind of hedge your bets a little bit, and kind of, you almost have to be a jack of all trades so that you can adjust as the predominant technology adjusts. But I don't know if I know the answer to that, if I'm honest. Yeah.
that makes sense. I think it is like, a lot of it will change with how AI is changing. And I think that kind of leads me to my sort of last question here for you today. Where do you kind of see, the future of AI? Like, is it agentic AI? Like, is it, Gen AI is going to keep growing? Is it within search that we're going to kind of see more growth? What are your personal thoughts on like, what's next to come for AI?
That's a good question. I think the answer is yes to all the things you just said. Because I think where I see a lot of people, where I see the progress happening, like within even the work that we do, is different people making AI their own and applying it to their own niche use cases, right? And so I see a lot of Gen AI, but I also see people chaining multiple AI agents together as well. And so, and then I think the other piece of it is you've got Elon Musk and is kind of adding the robot aspect to it. Now, where AI didn't have a physical connection to the world, now you're adding that element to it as well. And so, although it probably doesn't apply as much in marketing per se, but I think, the combination, and even throwing no code into the mix, and now AI generated code, I think also kind of does the same thing, is it allows people to innovate within their kind of niche very quickly. Whereas technology, the beauty of AI and no code and AI generated code is it's made technology accessible. It's democratized access to technology in a way that, it used to be the big companies were the only ones to be able to build some of this custom technology. Now, a kid in their basement can build really robust technology very quickly. And so I think that's going to only add to the innovation. But I also think it lowers the bar, which makes it really competitive in anything that you do. And so it really is going to be interesting how that plays out. But I do think the interesting thing is just, again, like what I said, is it just democratizes technology. And so you're allowing a lot more people to be able to innovate in a lot more different fields that in the past would not have been able to have access to the technology purely because of cost, right? And so now they have access to this. And so I think you'll see really fragmented uses of the technology, because everyone's going to be able to apply it to their specific use case. Is that I don't know if that's a direct answer to your question, but that's kind of where I see things going, just because of the access that people have now.
Definitely. No, thank you so much. This has definitely been such a fascinating conversation. And I think it's safe to say that AI is clearly reshaping the way we think. But, like, any technology or tool, it's also about how we use it. And I think for those marketers out there that are still kind of hesitant to utilize AI, I think something that you said to me before really stands out is like, you have to step into the game now because that's what your competitors are doing, right? So I think just by getting yourself to it, like getting that exposure, it's going to make a lot of difference. So I think thank you again for such a wonderful conversation. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to, have you tell our listeners, like, where can people learn more about your work and how can they kind of, reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can visit our website, which is www.drivephase, DRIVEPHASE.co, not .com, but .co. On there, you can schedule a free consultation with us. We talk to anyone, and you can see a lot of our case studies on there. All our socials are on there as well. I do a lot of content on YouTube and other channels, really just educating more so on no code, but some on AI as well, on just kind of the benefits and as I talked about, just the access that's now available to people, where it doesn't cost $1 million now. In fact, we've saved our clients $1 million in app development costs by using no code. So as I said, the beauty of the technology, the upside to it is just the democratization, the access that a lot of these technologies provide to everyone. But it comes back to what you just said, is it doesn't, it's accessible, but it doesn't mean that it's just going to come to you. You still have to put in the work, educate yourself, and just go in and try it and utilize it, and test it out and experiment and not be afraid to fail with it.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you so much again for joining us today. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to, share your thoughts and let us know what your thoughts on AI and how it's really reshaping your thinking or your business. So see you next time and thank you again.
Thanks again.